We have a blockbuster trade rumor to discuss today. Is Matthew Tkachuk trying to force his way out of Calgary and into St. Louis? We'll discuss that as well as some information on the upcoming expansion draft, and we have another signing as well. We'll jump into the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey, and of course, as I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. First up, we have a couple of quick items. First up, the San Jose Sharks have re-signed forward Matt Nieto to a 2-year contract valued at $850,000. So of course, the veteran forward's been with the Sharks. This is a second stint with the team. Been there a while. You know, a decent depth forward, good defensive forward. So it makes sense. Fairly cheap, inexpensive, low-risk contract for San Jose, and they certainly have enough big ticket items on their books that they need players like this, so it makes sense to keep them around and keep them in the fold. We also got word today that the Ottawa Senators have re-signed their AHL head coach Troy Mann to a 2-year extension. Now, this is an important piece for them, even though he's working with their AHL affiliate. If you look at their current roster, they've had a lot of players graduate to the NHL over the last year or two as they go through this rebuild, and he's played a big role in their development, with a lot of them having a ton of success under him at the AHL level. To me, he's likely the next coach of the Ottawa Senators, unless Coach DJ Smith ends up sticking around for an extended period of time. But at this point, DJ Smith's going into the final year of his contract, and I don't know how things are going to go beyond the current season, but if the Sens decide in the next few years to go in a different direction, I would think Mann will be their next head coach. And of course, his brother Trent Mann works closely with GM Pierre Dorion too, so certainly both those brothers are important pieces to Ottawa, and it's nice to see him sticking around to continue working with their great young prospects. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have some news concerning the upcoming Seattle expansion draft. The NHL has released a list of players that are exempt from this process due to the fact that they've been injured on long-term injury reserve. So I'll show you a quick list of those players. Now, some of these I'm a little confused as why they felt the need to include them, because some of them are already pending unrestricted free agents, but I suppose technically their contracts don't expire until the end of July here, July 28th. So I suppose technically they're on the books. But some of these players are certainly guys we're not expecting to ever see in the NHL again. But this list includes obviously Ryan Kessler, Marian Hossa, Brandon Dubinsky, Brent Seabrook, Andrew Shaw, Stephen Johns, Henrik Zetterberg, Corey Crawford, Lucas Pisa, Johnny Boychuk, Matt Niskanen, Zach Trotman, Alex Steen, Miriam Gaborik, Michael Furlan, Brian Little, Henrik Lundqvist, and Anders Nilsson. Now, there's a couple of them that could possibly make an NHL return. I know Lundqvist seems interested. Of course, we don't know yet if he's going to be able to play after the recovery from the heart surgery he had this past year. I mean, there's a few of them there that maybe come back, but majority of them are players that are technically on LTIR to finish out their career, and a bunch of them are actually expiring at the end of this current season. But the other thing I guess that's kind of valuable to point out about that, not that I'd expect Seattle to do it anyways, but it just goes to show that they can't be taking contracts that are on LTIR. Now, even though they wouldn't have the need themselves, you know, it potentially could be a move where they claim them and then trade it to a team that has cap problems so that they can kind of exceed the cap like we saw Tampa and other teams do this past offseason. So we'll see what happens here, but obviously I don't expect any of these players to even be considered anyway, but they're exempt from the process for the upcoming expansion draft. A couple quick updates too on NHL head coaching situations. Now in Arizona, we know they're currently still looking for their next head coach. And of course, we don't really know a lot about many of the candidates that are being considered, but I know Elliot Friedman on his latest podcast episode that came out yesterday indicated he still feels that Mike Van Ryn is likely the leading candidate, but that they might be waiting to speak with Lane Lambert, who's an assistant with the Islanders. So I guess we'll see when the Islanders season comes to an end, which could be as early as the next couple days here, but it could also drag on if they force Game 7 or go on to play for the Stanley Cup in the finals. That could influence the Coyotes' decision there, but of course Van Ryn has connections to the GM, Bill Armstrong, from their time in St. Louis together, plus he worked in Arizona before, so there's a lot of familiarity there, and it wouldn't be a huge shocker. Lambert is a guy who's been mentioned numerous times in head coaching vacancies in the last couple of years too, so I understand why they may want to speak to him, but right now it's leaning towards Van Ryn, but we don't really know until it's completely finalized, of course. And when it comes to the Seattle Kraken, I still believe that Rick Tocchet's the leading contender, but as Elliot Friedman also mentioned on his latest podcast, there are some other kind of secretive candidates, we could say. He said that Ron Francis has been doing a good job and kind of keeping things under wraps. Says that they've been a tough team so far to really get much inside information on. There was some word that there was at least 2 other candidates that have had recent interviews, but there was even some talk about Kevin Dineen. Of course, he's coached in the NHL before. He's recently coached in the American Hockey League. He's coached at a variety of different levels, and of course, him and Ron Francis would know each other well from their playing days as well. So he might be in the mix, and he said even if he's not a head coach, he very well could be involved, be in the staff in some capacity as an assistant or other type of role with Seattle as well. So we'll see what happens, but right now still leaning towards Rick Tocchet, but is believed to be 1 or 2 mystery candidates out there that might have been talking to Francis that many people just don't know exactly who they are as of yet, but we'll continue to see what we can find out in that regard. Now, before we jump into the Matthew Tkachuk talk, I want to take a quick moment here and pause to acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thanks very much for taking the time to listen to our promotional video. I appreciate that. Let's dive into the juicy rumor here of the day. And of course, that involves Matthew Tkachuk. Now, yesterday we talked about a potential Matthew Tkachuk trade to St. Louis, but it was under a completely different context. Now, yesterday, I was referencing an article written in a St. Louis media outlet talking about how the Blues could use a reset and that their hometown boy, Matthew Tkachuk, would be the ideal kind of player that they need to kind of help make that happen. Now, this next piece, we're talking about it again today, but for a completely different reason. Now, Shane O'Brien, who's a former NHL player, was a defenseman with the Vancouver Canucks and a few other teams during his NHL career. Now currently is involved with his own podcast, and he also appears on NHL Network Radio on Sirius XM, where he co-hosts the Power Play with Steve Kouleas. And yesterday, he said some things that kind of got a lot of people riled up involving Matthew Tkachuk. Now, of course, keep in mind that O'Brien, like I said, is a former player, has got lots of connections, still works within the league, obviously in the media side of things now. So he knows lots of people, has lots of connections. Doesn't mean everything he's saying here is right and accurate. I'm just saying that he's a legitimate source who would know people. And he's indicating that he's got people that he knows that's telling him that Matthew Tkachuk wants out of Calgary. And obviously the preference would be to go to his hometown St. Louis Blues. Now, of course, we don't really know a lot of the reasons why Matthew Tkachuk would want out of Calgary, but I do think it's fair to say, like I mentioned yesterday, and I've said it before, that Matthew Tkachuk just didn't seem to be himself this year. And it just seemed like earlier in the year, the team kind of, I assumed, asked him to kind of change the style on how he played a little bit, because he wasn't that normal, tough to play against, pesty, get in your face, under your skin kind of player that he was known for earlier in his NHL career. Now, the upcoming season will be the second and final year of his second contract that he signed with the Flames. He will once again be a restricted free agent. His average annual value, so his cap hit, is $7 million. So it's not terrible for a higher end player, but he is owed $9 million in actual cash payouts for the coming season, which means his next contract as an RFA would have to be qualified at $9 million. That's why a lot of these RFA deals, you see them be backloaded so they can kind of ensure that their following contract, starts with a bigger number than their current one on the average annual value side of things. So for Matthew Tkachuk, any team acquiring him is going to have a fairly hefty payout, and they're going to obviously have to do a fairly hefty next contract. Now, depending on his performance, they may not get stuck paying him $9 million on a long-term deal. It just kind of depends on where things go. This means he has to be qualified at that level to retain his rights. They could end up doing another short-term contract around that amount and see where things go. But ideally, I would think any acquiring team would probably want to get him on a long-term deal next time around to make sure that he sticks around here. Now, the other part of what O'Brien was talking about is that the Blues would want to move Vladimir Tarasenko. Now, we've heard rumblings from other sources on multiple locations since the Blues season came to an end that Tarasenko could be on the way out here. The only thing that really complicates this is he's got a full no-trade clause, and it's really debatable on where he'd be willing to waive to go. Now, keep in mind, he's 29 going on 30, just coming off his third shoulder surgery. To me, he's clearly not the same sniper that he was earlier in his career. He hasn't played a lot in the past 2 seasons because of all of his time from the surgery, then the extra procedure he had to have because it didn't quite heal properly the first time through. He's kind of what you'd call damaged goods. Now, he's only got a couple years left on his current contract, similar AAV to Matthew Tkachuk. So from a cap perspective, it wouldn't be, a terrible situation to have these two swap players, but to have these two players swap cities. But at the same time, Matthew Tkachuk is, 5 years plus younger. So clearly it's going to take more than Tarasenko at his current state to get a deal done. I would assume that the St. Louis Blues would have to include defenseman Vince Dunn because he's a player that they certainly seem to be interested in trading as well. And then you're probably looking at another piece too, to be honest. I'm thinking either Robert Thomas or Jordan Kyrou would probably have to go into the mix there as well. Now, I'm not convinced that this deal is going to happen. I'm not convinced 100% right now that Matthew Tkachuk indeed wants out of Calgary. Obviously, this is a very interesting topic coming from a very, reputable source of somebody who could possibly have some really good information here. So I guess we'll see how this offseason plays out. And if more information develops on Tkachuk wanting to leave Calgary, we know that the Calgary Flames are likely going to be going through a bit of a retool this offseason after another disappointing down season where they missed the playoffs. A couple years before that, they've had better regular seasons, but disappointing early playoff exits. This team definitely needs to make some changes in order to move it forward. There's no doubt about it, but many felt, myself included, that Sean Monahan or Johnny Gaudreau would be the more likely players to be traded, and I still think that's likely the case. I honestly don't think the Flames would want to trade Tkachuk unless he really insists on it. Now, if he pushes the envelope here, decides that he's not going to play, wants out, obviously he might be able to force their hand. But at the same time, doesn't mean they're going to end up necessarily trading him exactly where he wants to go because he doesn't have any leverage in that regard. Unless, I guess, you could always refuse to play. Sometimes players are able to get more leverage than they might appear to theoretically have on paper through their contract or whatnot. But still, it's a situation that, unless he demands it, I don't see the Flames going down this road. They'd be crazy to. Wouldn't you move one of your older core pieces that has not been able to help get this team over the hump, whereas Tkachuk could be the future leader and captain of this team? To me, it makes a lot of sense for them to build around him, but I think they also need to let Matthew Tkachuk play the style of hockey that has helped him be successful, and I just didn't see that this year. And like I said earlier on, there was a bunch of situations over last year and this year where obviously, like I said, he's a pesky kind of player, stirs things up, sometimes crosses the line, sometimes causes a little bit of trouble, which is, just in his blood. It's nothing that you wouldn't expect from a Tkachuk player. His brother's the same way, their dad was the same way. It's just the way they're built. But still, it just seemed like at some point there was a situation where he was talked to and he just tried to change the way he played, and it doesn't seem to work for him. So could he be frustrated and want out? It's certainly a possibility. We can't say that with any certainty right now, but it's just interesting and kind of fascinating to think about. For me, if I'm a Calgary Flames fan and I'm hearing that Matthew Tkachuk wants out, and if this turns out to be true, that's devastating news. Like I said, he's one of the few pieces you'd want to build around. You've got Tkachuk, you got Elias Lindholm, who I think is a really solid guy. Andrew Mangiapane's really coming into his own. Dylan Dubé's working his way up. You get some other young players that can hopefully find roles within the team. It's guys like Monahan and possibly Gaudreau that I'd want to shake things up with and see if I can get some more future-based players coming back to kind of build around with those other players I just mentioned. You get a case of Mark Giordano, the current captain of the team, is likely going to be exposed to the Kraken. I don't know if they'll take him or not, but it could be a case where, he might be moving too. He's only got 1 year left on his contract. What do the Flames want to do with him? It's hard to say. He's up there in years too. There could be a lot of changes coming to Calgary, and I did not expect Matthew Tkachuk to be front and center of those potential changes. Now, I've seen some people say that if they're going to trade Matthew Tkachuk, it better be for a guy like Jack Eichel. And you have to wonder, could that possibly even be something that could be considered? I mean, obviously, Jack Eichel is out there. His name is front and center. We've heard Calgary as being one of the teams of, being interested, which is not surprising. I said there's 30 teams, I guarantee, that are interested in Jack Eichel. But I know there's been numerous times I've heard NHL insiders probably mention Calgary as one of 6 to 8 teams that seem to be more serious about it than many of the other teams. And I've always said I doubt it they could put together a proper package to really stand a good chance if they really want to be serious about it, because they wouldn't want to include Matthew Tkachuk. But maybe if he wants out and he's insisting on it, could they go down that road instead? To me, that would be a way better deal than sending him to St. Louis for an aging former sniper who doesn't seem to be able to play at that level anymore. I mean, no disrespect to Vladimir Tarasenko. He's had a good career, great goal scorer, but he just doesn't seem to be the same guy he used to be. And even though he could be brought to Calgary, which you need him to agree to as well. I mean, that's the other thing. Is Vladimir Tarasenko at age 30 going to want to go to a Calgary Flames team that is, obviously going through some significant changes and might not be, near winning a championship anytime soon? I really don't know how he would feel about it. But it was reported last summer as well, after Ryan O'Reilly was made captain, that there was reports that Tarasenko wasn't happy. And now we're hearing all these reports about Tarasenko maybe being traded. Obviously, like I said, he's got to work with them. He'd have to approve it. But still, it's a situation that maybe the writing's on the wall for him as well. And I wouldn't be completely shocked if Tarasenko were traded. I just don't know if he would agree to this kind of trade. So, and at the same time, like I said yesterday, I would not be shocked that if Matthew Tkachuk had the option to play anywhere else in the NHL, that his first choice would be his hometown St. Louis Blues. His dad played there for a long time. That's where they grew up. I have no doubt that would be very appealing to him. But still, like something like this would be difficult to pull off. So it's a situation we're going to monitor. I'm not putting a lot of stock into this here as of yet. I'm not going to say here that I think it's really going to happen. Does it make sense? To a degree, yes, and to a degree, no. From the St. Louis side of things, makes a lot of sense. From the Calgary side of things, not so much. But if you have a player who does indeed want out, you kind of lose some of your leverage, unfortunately. So I guess where it really boils down to, is there any truth to Matthew Tkachuk wanting to leave Calgary? We may not find out the answers to that for days, weeks, or months. We may never hear any more about it. It's really difficult to say, but if we do, we'll talk about it further and discuss what could possibly happen. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments about this Matthew Tkachuk wanting out of Calgary rumor. Do you think a trade with St. Louis could be worked out if it's true? Do you think they should pursue maybe a Jack Eichel deal instead if it is true as well? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.